The Agenda with Michael Knight on News Radio 560 KPQ and KPQ.com.
It's 1:34 on a Friday afternoon. This is The Agenda, the show with no agenda whatsoever, and our very special guest is John M. Brangwin, attorney at law right here in town. He's a member of the law firm called Woods and Brangwin, and he's just returned from the National Firearms Law Seminar in Dallas, Texas, right next to the NRA's gathering. And I can't imagine what you've learned down there about defending people who make mistakes with guns, but it must have been something, John. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. The National Firearms Seminar is actually put on by a branch of the National Rifle Association, and they hold it every year during the NRA convention time, so that moves around to different places. This year it was in Dallas, Texas. This is the 21st one they've had. It's about 250 lawyers, judges, and other legal professionals. It's the leading lawyers that deal with Second Amendment law.
And when you take a Second Amendment case to court, that's a load, isn't it?
It is. My practice in Second Amendment law is really limited. As you know, my biggest practice area is defending people accused of DUI and other type-related crimes. But I do get some gun work, mostly in the form of people that have been denied the ability to purchase a gun and want to try to get those rights back based on a state conviction. And I do handle those cases, and that's why I wanted to go. Lawyers have to get 15 credit hours of continuing education. Lots of industries have continuing education requirements, and so this seminar was meeting some of that.
Are these laws changing? Are they always modifying themselves and evolving?
Well, there's three different fronts of firearm legislation, firearm laws. One comes from Congress, U.S. Congress. One comes from our state legislature, and the other comes from the courts. We have had a lot of, the U.S. Supreme Court makes decisions, most recently the Heller decision involving that people in Washington, D.C. and later in Chicago can possess pistols in their home. And that was in 2008, and there was an update on Second Amendment litigation, but the Heller decision is really still the law of the land, and a lot has been learned by Second Amendment lawyers following that case.
What else did you learn in Dallas about the changing laws concerning guns and who can own them legally?
So the two things I really think your listeners would be interesting is talking about a little bit about marijuana and guns, and then about guns at the airport. Let's
start with marijuana in case that's not an obvious connection. Can you be high and legally possess a gun?
Well, that's an interesting question. So, of course, in Washington, we were one of the first two states to legalize recreational marijuana. But federally, marijuana remains illegal. In fact, it's a Schedule I narcotic. It's on the same level as heroin. I'll leave it to your listeners to decide what's ruined more lives, opiates, which are a Schedule II narcotic, or marijuana, which is a Schedule I narcotic. Wow. But be that as it may,
once again, the people writing drug laws know nothing about drugs, apparently.
I suppose not. But federally, it remains against the law to be an unlawful user of drugs, including marijuana, and possess a firearm or purchase a firearm. That is the federal law. That is true today. And so we have a real clash, so to speak, we have recreational marijuana in this state. Anyone that's over 21 can go to any store, several here in Wenatchee, purchase marijuana, use marijuana, and many of those people, given how many people in this town own guns, certainly some of the people that are buying recreational marijuana own guns. Yet, federally, that's against the law to own a gun. Where you're going to see that hit the most home for people is when you go to purchase a gun. So everyone that goes to purchase a gun, whether you go to Stan's or any of the other retailers here in town, you're going to fill out an ATF form 4473. And you'll put your name down, your address, where you're born, social security number, etc. And then you'll answer a series of questions. And the fifth question on the series of questions there lists, are you an unlawful user of or addicted to marijuana or any depressant, stimulant, narcotic drug, or any other controlled substance? Added in 2016 in bold language, it says the following: warning, the use or possession of marijuana remains unlawful under federal law, regardless of whether it has been legalized or decriminalized for medicinal or recreational purposes in the state where you reside. So, anyone that's going and buying recreational marijuana and answers that question no, even though they are a user of marijuana.
Violation.
That's a problem. They're either lying on a federal form, which that's a felony. Now, the good news is that prosecutions are the NRA Assistant General Counsel said that she knew of no prosecutions for someone answering that question no and then being discovered later to be a marijuana user. But there have been cases where this has come to the forefront. Specifically, in 2011, all the gun stores, including the gun stores here locally, were sent a letter, and it told them that if they knew that a prospective purchaser has a medical marijuana card, they should not sell that person a firearm. So if you walk into Stan's and you're wearing a marijuana T-shirt or something that's marijuana-related.
Tie-dye, Grateful Dead T-shirt.
Right. You never know.
Who knows, right?
They are supposed to deny you the gun purchase. The state of Hawaii went so far as to, in Hawaii, you have to have a license to own a gun. So they know who all the gun owners in the state of Hawaii are. And they know who, in Hawaii, they also keep track of who has a medical marijuana card. So they cross-referenced those, and anyone that had both a medical marijuana card and a firearm, they sent them a letter and told them to turn in their firearms because they were in violation of the law.
You can keep your marijuana card, but you have to turn in your gun.
Right. And the Ninth Circuit, which is the circuit that controls the West Coast, said that that was okay, that was constitutional for them to deny you the right to purchase a gun if you have a medical marijuana card. Now, the court did say, though, if you just burn your card or tear up your card, kind of like tearing up a draft card and say, oh, I no longer have a medical marijuana card.
Which is true.
Then you are a legitimate purchaser and that there's no violation and you can purchase a gun.
There are a number of states that have legal marijuana, but the federal government has the same view of that legality in terms of the nationwide rollout of the law. If you're in Colorado, yes, it's legal in Colorado. Yes, it's still illegal federally. Has that law been tested anywhere? Is that going to hold up with so many states legalizing marijuana and the federal government not moving on it?
With the supremacy clause, that will continue to be a conflict until Congress takes some action to change marijuana from being a Schedule I narcotic.
Did these cases that are on the fence like that in the war between the feds and the locals go to court very often?
Well, interestingly, this week, the Supreme Court struck down PASPA, which was the sports gambling,
yes.
And that kind of brushes on this because that was talking about the federal government commanding the states to take certain action, and that's why they held that PASPA was unconstitutional. In this case, though, in sports betting, the federal government was not making sports betting illegal. They were telling the states to make sports betting illegal. This is different. The federal government absolutely regulates firearms in this country. We have a whole agency, ATF, that regulates firearms. So firearms are regulated by the state, and narcotics are regulated by the feds. So, I'm sorry, I think I said state earlier, feds and feds. So firearms are regulated by the feds, narcotics are regulated by the feds, a lot different than sports gambling.
Although there's an addictive property to sports gambling that I don't know if the law takes into consideration.
I couldn't comment on that. I do like to bet on March Madness games, but I always do so in the state of Nevada.
As long as you lose, John, that's all that really matters.
Right. Well, I tell you, the sports books are going to lose big. If the Las Vegas Golden Knights win the Stanley Cup, the sports books are going to get killed. They were selling tickets at the beginning of the season because it's an expansion team at like odds of 150 to 1.
Yeah, and they sold a lot of them.
Correct.
People love those odds. Well, and in fact, most of them are local. I mean, there are actually people in Las Vegas who just drove by and say, I think I'll put 100 on the Knights. And the interesting thing about that is not that they're winning, but that they know exactly how much they're going to lose as a result of it, and it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. I mean, they're not going to lose their shirt. They're okay. I think they have reserve funds.
I'm sure that no casinos will be crashing down because of it, but it's kind of nice to see the players win against the sports books. And I think the sports books really didn't see how favorable the hockey expansion draft is. So if Seattle is in the mix for a hockey team, presumably Seattle could have a good team right away. Because the NHL has very favorable draft rules for expansion teams. And I think Las Vegas didn't really calculate that into their odds.
I hope that's the case for the Totems or whatever their name's going to be.
Right. Well, I'd like them to be the Seattle Metropolitans.
I do too. Tradition. Plus, the Metropolitans are already champions.
Yep, that's right. Their name's on the Stanley Cup. I saw it in Toronto.
Damn right it is. Well, is there anything else about this conflict between marijuana and guns that you think is going to change? I know laws don't evolve sometimes. They just suddenly change through the legislation and through societal pressure. But how do you think this is going to come out? Because the feds have such a death grip on their marijuana. They love making it illegal. Well,
under the Obama administration, there was really a hands-off policy. There's been some change under the Trump administration for that. But again, the Assistant General Counsel at the NRA was still predicting that federal prosecutions for marijuana users having guns or buying guns would be pretty minimal. Where you will see charges and have seen charges is when it's in conjunction with something else. For instance, there was a gentleman in California that decided it would be a good idea to deal in guns. He actually had a federal firearms license, and he was also dealing in marijuana. And he tried to bring a Second Amendment challenge saying he shouldn't be prohibited from having a gun. He was successfully prosecuted.
I think so. That's just a little bit too much of all things to all people.
Exactly. You don't want to be a one-stop shop for marijuana buyers and gun buyers. It's a bad idea.
Periodically, somebody, either intentionally or by accident, shows up at SeaTac with a revolver in their luggage or perhaps on their person. Sometimes they get forgetful. Sometimes we wonder if they have their brains about them. But what happens when this is viewed not as a sideshow for a kicker in a news story, but what about when it gets to court?
So firearms in airports are an interesting topic. TSA last year discovered about 4,000 firearms in people trying to get on planes. About a third of those had a round in the chamber. Seattle SeaTac Airport made the top 10 list. They found 75 guns last year. Number one in the country was Atlanta with 245 guns, and followed by where I just was, Dallas-Fort Worth.
I was going to say Dallas had to be on the list.
211 guns at Dallas. So the jurisdiction at airports is that it's state-run all the way until you get past TSA. So the TSA area itself, that's state-controlled, but once you get in past TSA, then you're federal. If you accidentally plenty of people that listen to KPQ have concealed weapons permits, and it's not that uncommon that someone accidentally leaves a gun in a purse or a backpack or something like that.
With a
pistol in it, something like that.
Yes, with one in the chamber.
Well, one in the chamber or not, wouldn't matter. You really hope that TSA finds the gun, when they run it through the X-ray. You want them to find it. Because then you're still in state law. Then it's a gross misdemeanor. You have violated RCW 941-300, which says it is unlawful to take a gun into the restricted access area of a commercial airport. Gross misdemeanor charge, you could get up to a year in jail.
But after you put your shoes on and they find it, you're in trouble.
If you're past there, now it's 10 years in federal prison. Because now it's a federal offense. You may as well have taken the pistol on the airplane.
So intent is included in the charges. They just assume that you intended to use it.
You got it past security, so there you are.
Yeah.
That's a problem for you. But most of the time, TSA will find it, and they're going to call local law enforcement who, and Texas has a law that all that happens is the sheriff comes or the police officer comes and they say, "Oh, sir, you can't have that gun here." And in Texas, as long as you just leave and take it to your car, no charges. That's on the books in Texas. We don't have that. Here it'd be a gross misdemeanor. It'd be up to the officer's discretion. I talked to the chief criminal deputy for Douglas County, Steve Grosclose. He told me he was unaware of any guns at Pangborn, any issues that his officers have had to deal with over there. They've had some ammunition cases. But
isn't that odd that SeaTac is in the top 10 and Pangborn has 0 guns go through the detection devices?
Now, he didn't do a hard search. That was I just asked him off the top of his head, and he could not recall any incidents of guns coming through. So responsible gun ownership is alive and well in the Wenatchee Valley. But here's what's going to happen, though, TSA-wise. TSA is going to send you a $3,000 fine for you having entered the checkpoint with a firearm. And if someone were to get that civil penalty, they have to respond within 30 days, and the fine actually can range anywhere from $3,900 to $9,800. Don't know how they come up with that range, but that $3,000 is is kind of the base for first-time violators, and they would jack it up if you were ever dumb enough to do it again. And you have several options if you were to get one of those letters. One is you could just pay it, and they even have a prepayment discount. If you send them a check within 30 days, they take half off, so then it's down to $1,500. And you can also contest it, probably a bad idea. But the best way to probably handle it would be to hire an attorney and to request what they call an informal conference. They give you a phone conference. You talk about what happened, talk about any mitigating circumstances. I was late for my flight. I didn't remember. I grabbed my black backpack that I didn't think had a gun. I should have grabbed the blue one, what have you. And many times that a good attorney could maybe get the fine reduced to as low as $500. Now, what the attorney would charge you for that, maybe, if the attorney charges you $1,000 and it's only $1,500 you pay in the first 30 days, maybe it's just smartest to pay it if you did indeed have a firearm that you tried to get through security.
Now, does that put you on a list? And next time you go through security, you're listed as someone who brought a gun through security?
Well, most likely, if you're on what they call TSA pre-check, right, they will disqualify you and revoke you from that program for a undisclosed amount of time that's in their purview. And but usually it's 3 years, but that's automatic. But I would guess that they have a way to put you into secondary screening a lot if you ever try to bring a gun through.
Has anyone ever come up with a Second Amendment defense for accidentally bringing a gun into a secure place like that? Is there a defense based on the Second Amendment?
I can't imagine there would be. The Supreme Court and courts across the country have always said that the Second Amendment isn't so broad as to not allow reasonable restrictions, and that would certainly be reasonable to make aircraft not allow guns on them. Although in Alaska, on the smaller flights in Alaska, like the turboprop type planes, there's no security. You just get on the plane. Now, you're still prohibited from bringing a firearm on, but there's no security. You just walk on the plane.
And it's Alaska, so maybe you just have to live with the local customs.
Right.
I mean, they have those giant Zodiac bears. If you meet one, you do want to have a gun.
There's many places in Alaska that having a gun would be a very, very good idea.
Well, when you take your cases to court that involve gun ownership, gun mistakes, gun errors, gun crime, what's the view when you finally get in front of the judge? Is it a hard fight to win those cases?
Yeah, I don't see a lot of weapons charges. I see a lot of unlawful display of weapons cases. Someone thinks that in an altercation it's a good idea to flash a gun. Generally a bad idea. It's bringing a gun to a knife fight or bringing a gun to an argument. Almost always a bad idea. I mean, there's certainly times that it would be a good idea to use a gun for self-defense, but you should be judicious about it. That should be your remedy of last resort, not your remedy of first resort. So I have seen several occasions of charges involving people that bring a gun and display a gun. Road rage incidents, people hold up guns to kind of get the other driver's attention. Always a bad idea. Always prosecuted.
So the police and everyone else in the room wants to know, well, you've drawn your weapon. What do you plan to do with it? Not just show it to us and we will comply. That's usually the next question is, well, you got it out. What are you going to do with it now? We assume you're going to use it, so that puts you in a terrible position.
It could put you in a position of assault in the first degree, a felony. A very serious felony, or it could be as low as unlawful display of a weapon. So if you're going to pull a gun out, you need to be certain that it's an appropriate time to do so.
Is this a good time to be a lawyer arguing things around the Second Amendment, or is it a difficult position to take and to win?
Well, we had another school shooting today.
Yes, we did.
In the Houston area. My political leanings are kind of middle of the road, and so attending the NRA convention was interesting. It was Texas, so there weren't a lot of protesters, and On Friday, it rained pretty hard, which dampened their spirits quite a bit. But, the NRA takes a very polarizing position. You are not going to restrict guns at all. And, a decent segment of the population wants gun restrictions. Personally, I think focusing on the guns is a mistake. You need to focus on the people, not the tools. And I think more legislation around the people would make some sense. But focusing on the tools, I think, is generally a mistake and not particularly helpful, especially in America, where we already have so many firearms that are in people's hands already.
You have a whole book in front of you that came from the good people at the 21st Annual National Firearms Law Seminar. Do any pages in there refer to the Second Amendment in terms of changing it, altering it, guaranteeing that it never be changed, that it never be altered, interpreting it in ways that it's never been interpreted before?
Well, you have to keep in mind that this continuing legal education was a group of Second Amendment attorneys that are pretty much all NRA members, so that group is certainly only trying to defend the Second Amendment or broaden the Second Amendment. That group is somewhat biased in that direction. The seminar presentations themselves weren't biased at all, but I think the audience was to a large degree.
But isn't that the way it is, where you have someone with a political point of view, and the NRA is free to take whatever stand that they want, but under the rule of law, you don't have a lot of wiggle room. If the law says something, isn't it true that that's what it means?
Oh, I wouldn't have a job if it was that simple, right? I mean, the law.
Well, now there's two sides to argue with.
Right, the law is just nothing but gray area. I mean, that's where I come in. So there's always points to argue on both sides. The National Firearms Law Seminar was in conjunction with the NRA convention, which was also there, attended by something like 80,000 people. They had 650,000 square feet of exhibit space with gun manufacturers and shirt manufacturers, anything, ammunition, anything you can think of involving firearms in any way were there. So imagine 16 town Toyota centers full of gun stuff. So
Can you buy a briefcase with a secret pocket for your Uzi?
You could buy almost anything there. They had backpacks. They had plenty of holsters. Of course, I think the best holster available is made right here in Chelan County. A company called Gunfighters Inc. That I'm proud to help out from time to time. They make excellent Kydex holsters. You can buy them down at stands, or you can go on their website. So
quick draw holsters.
They're made out of Kydex, which is kind of this hard plastic, so they really hold the gun close to you, and they're just an excellent product. So as far as holsters, I don't even bother to look when I go to these various gun shows. I don't even bother to look at holsters. I know where I'm going to buy my next holster. It's always from Gunfighters.
People may assume that the Washington, because it's had a long tradition of conservative politics in the center, and a wide open view toward the wilderness and the conservation, and that includes for many people gun ownership. That there's not a gun problem in Washington. Is that accurate?
Gun problem. I think it's a people problem, not a gun problem. I own plenty of firearms myself. I haven't had a problem with them, so I really think it's the person holding the weapon that could potentially be a problem rather than the weapon themselves.
And what's the future of preventing the wrong person from getting that gun? Because that's really that's really about what we have left. We don't have anything else to play with, it seems to me.
By initiative, we have a pretty strict policy on gun transfers, right? You can't just I can't just bring you a gun and sell you a gun over the counter. I have to get a federal firearms licensee to do that, run the form that I was telling you about. So pretty tight control that way in Washington State. You
can tell that I'm out of time. I'm sorry, John.
No problem.
Will you come back?
I will come back.
Excellent, because we just barely scratched the surface on this one. John Brangwin is our guest, attorney at law at Woods and Brangwin here in town on Mission Street, and he's just returned from the National Firearms Law Seminar in Dallas. And your Second Amendment rights are not being challenged to the point where you have to worry about anything at this point, or in the future, it seems to me, but I'm just taking a wild guess. Gotta go!
You're listening to The Agenda on News Radio 560.